My name is and contrary to what you might expect, I'm not the archetypal high-powered executive strutting around in designer heels. Although my father is a prominent figure in the business world with a company so massive it almost has its zip code, and despite my pricey education, I've always been more comfortable in a simple cubicle than a luxurious corner office. My family isn't thrilled about it. They envisioned a different path for me. My brother Lien is the family's shining star, groomed to take over our father's empire, while I've made it clear that the corporate throne is not my destiny. I'd rather avoid the drama and pressure of leadership. Then there's Cannon. Imagine this. I'm out trying to relax with friends at a rundown bar when Cannon walks in, tray in hand and a smile that stops you in your tracks. He might be just a waiter, but there's something about him that's refreshingly genuine. His simplicity and outlook on life felt like a breath of fresh air. We started talking, and soon it became clear that we clicked. Our interests, hobbies, and perspectives aligned perfectly. When my parents learned about Cannon, they couldn't hide their amusement. A waiter? They would chuckle as if I'd brought home a creature from another planet. They saw him as just a casual fling, but for me, it was serious. He's real. He understands me, I would argue, frustrated by their narrow views. My dad wasn't pleased either, criticizing my choice to play house with a boy who serves drinks. But Cannon was different. He wasn't about chasing money or status. He was about genuinely living life, which was exactly what I wanted. I stood firm, telling my parents, I love him. He's not caught up in all this, gesturing to the heavy expectations that hung over our family. They might have thought it was just a phase, but I knew better. Cannon proposed in his typical straightforward manner. No dramatic gestures, just an honest, marry me, and it took me a moment, but then it all made sense. Yes, let's do it, I found myself saying, ready to commit to the man who may have served drinks for a living but had captured my heart completely. From the marriage meeting, it was a whirlwind. We didn't even bring him home before we decided to tie the knot. It might sound impulsive, but it felt right, just moving forward together, no looking back. The wedding was modest, with only close family present. My father, a titan of industry, watched in disbelief as his daughter married a waiter in a ceremony that probably cost less than one of his typical business lunches. But to me, it was perfect, simple, genuine, and true to who we are. But here's the truth. Despite how much my dad looked like he wanted to be anywhere else during the wedding, he showed up when it mattered. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside. With his characteristic roughness, he managed up congratulations, and it wasn't the warm embrace I had hoped for, but coming from him, it held weight. So there we were, Cannon and I, officially married against all odds, our union a small rebellion founded on love and a sprinkle of defiance. Our quaint apartment quickly exposed the realities of everyday life. To me, the space felt snug and homely, but for Cannon, it was a surprising shift. One evening, as we navigated our cramped kitchen, I tried to find out his true thoughts about our new living arrangement. So, you're really okay with this place? It's a bit different from what you were expecting, right? Cannon paused, his attempt at a smile, not quite hiding his hesitation. Yeah, it's snug. I didn't expect a palace, but it's fine. It's got character, he remarked, though his words seemed to carry a heavier load of unspoken thoughts. Tensions around domestic chores began to surface early on. Cannon's reluctance to engage in household duties became a frequent sore point. He wasn't overwhelmed with work. His part-time job afforded him plenty of free time. Cannon, the dishes are piling up. Can you help out a bit? I asked one night, my voice tinged with fatigue. Come on, and you know I'm all thumbs with this stuff. Can't we just get takeout or something? He responded, his once charming grin wearing thin. The topic of career progression, or my deliberate avoidance of it, became a recurring issue. Cannon couldn't grasp my choice to stay in a non-leadership role at my father's company. Babe, you've got to think about the future. When are you planning to step up at work? There's so much potential for you there, he pressed, his frustration mounting. I sighed, the conversation too familiar. Cannon, we've talked about this. I'm happy where I am. I don't need a title to find fulfillment. But Cannon persisted, that's just it, and you could have both the title and the happiness. You're not seeing the big picture, his patience fading. Our talks grew more strained, and one particularly harsh exchange left a lasting scar on our relationship. Understand that I'm not driven by the same things as you. I don't measure my worth by a job title or a fat paycheck, I tried to explain, seeking some understanding. Cannon's face showed disbelief and frustration. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And you're sitting on a gold mine of opportunity, and you're too blind to see it, he blurted out, his words slicing deeply. Is that what you think of me? That I'm blind? Stupid? I retorted, the pain evident in my voice. No, and I just think you could do so much more, Cannon replied, his tone softer. But the damage was already done. Our once peaceful home turned into a battleground of ideals and expectations. The man I had married, who once shared my dreams of simplicity and genuine connection, seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone I hardly recognized. The days were long and draining, and I found myself longing for nothing more than to kick off my shoes and collapse on the couch, escaping the growing divide between us. But it seemed the universe had its twist in store for me. As soon as I stepped into our apartment, my heart dropped. Water was everywhere. The neighbors upstairs had somehow turned their mishap with indoor plumbing into an impromptu water feature, transforming our modest living space into a makeshift pool. With a deep sigh, I called my parents, my voice shaky, as I relayed the soggy disaster at hand. After a tense pause, a silence that felt thick with unspoken thoughts, my dad's voice finally came through, softer and warmer than usual. Of course you both can stay here. We'd be glad to have you. I could nearly see the reluctant smile in his tone. It was a relief, certainly, but it also signaled the beginning of an awkward chapter. Moving in with my parents as a newlywed was not how I pictured the start of married life with Cannon. Yet that was our new reality about to unfold. While it was comforting to have a roof over our heads, the dread of how this temporary arrangement might affect our relationship loomed large. My parents' mansion was worlds apart from our humble apartment, both in size and spirit. I wondered how Cannon would adapt to this new luxury and what it might mean for our future together. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, I began packing for what I hoped would be a short stay. Cannon was skeptical. Your parents' place? That's our best option. He groaned while we packed, his tone mixing disbelief with annoyance. Yeah, really? Unless you're hiding a luxury condo somewhere, I replied, trying to inject some lightness into the situation. He didn't respond, just continued packing in silence, his thoughts on independence and pride barely concealed. The moment we stepped into the mansion, I felt Cannon stiffen. The opulence of my childhood home had never really affected me, but through Cannon's eyes, it was as if we'd landed on a different planet. Wow. Just wow, Cannon murmured, his usual confidence diminishing slightly with each step. Surprisingly, it was my dad who attempted to break the ice first. Welcome. Make yourselves at home, he said, his smile more formal than inviting. Cannon managed a tight-lipped smile in return. The first few days were stiff and uncomfortable. Cannon seemed lost, wandering the halls like a tourist, while I tried to manage the sudden shift in our dynamics. Cannon's frustration eventually found its voice during dinner one evening. So, when do I get the grand tour of the family biz? Maybe find a little corner office for me, he joked, though the underlying tension was palpable to everyone, especially my dad, who nearly choked on his drink, laughing it off before responding. The company's son? It takes more than ambition. It takes years of training and the right background, he stated pointedly, his words both polite and decisively dismissive. Cannon's face turned a shade of deep red, a mix of embarrassment and irritation evident. Right, of course, silly me, he muttered, pushing his food around his plate. Later, in the privacy of our temporary room, Cannon's frustration boiled over. Can you believe him? The right background. What's that supposed to mean? He fumed, pacing back and forth. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm the storm. Cannon, you know how my dad is. He didn't mean, I started, but Cannon cut me off. Didn't mean what, Anne? That I'm not good enough? Because that's exactly how it sounded, he said, his anger cresting. The chasm between his world and mine had never felt so wide, and as I watched him pace, I realized just how much we'd have to overcome to bridge it. Life wasn't just about meeting standards, it was about dealing with his unique approach. "Hang in there, we're not at the end yet. We'll find a way," I reassured him, attempting to ease the palpable tension. As I reached for his hand, he pulled back gently, his initial anger giving way to a deeper, more vulnerable hurt. "It's really difficult, you know? I always feel like an outsider, even when I'm right here with you," he confessed. Our conversation lingered unresolved, echoing the growing rift between our different realities. Cannon struggled to navigate the silent expectations of my family and the unresolved issues that loomed between us. It was like a precarious mix, volatile and unpredictable. In our apartment, life seemed to momentarily regain its rhythm, or at least that's what I thought. However, as weeks unfolded into months, Cannon's presence dwindled, his absences grew longer, and our home began to feel more like an abandoned place marked by the remnants of his chaotic mornings and late nights, strewn with dirty laundry, neglected dishes, and the echoing silence of missed dialogues. Whenever I questioned him, he always had the same excuse: "Work's overwhelming, you know how it goes." But I felt there was something else keeping him away. Feeling more alone than ever, I reached out to Raiden, an old family friend and head of security at my dad's firm. To me, Raiden was akin to an uncle, always ready to offer advice or lend a hand. "Raiden, I'm worried about Cannon. Can you watch over him for a bit?" "Something doesn't seem right," I asked, my voice heavy with concern. "And you know I'm here for you." "It's taken care of," Raiden assured me, his tone serious yet comforting. Raiden's investigations soon brought devastating news. Cannon wasn't just tied up at work. He was involved in an affair. The woman, a fixture of wealth often seen near Cannon at his workplace, embodied the opulence I had always steered clear of. The irony of it all was bitter. Cannon, who once found my modest lifestyle endearing, was now enchanted by someone whose life screamed of the luxury I had avoided. With irrefutable evidence in hand, I confronted Cannon. Upon seeing the photos, his facade fell away, revealing defiance and contempt. "So what?" "Yes, she's driven, youthful, stunning, everything you are not," he retorted harshly, his words striking me like a venom-laced dart. The immediate sharp pain was a harsh contrast to the gradual, numbing realization that the man I once loved, the man I married, was now a stranger. "I want a divorce," I stated clearly, the words bitter in my mouth. It was a definitive statement, not a question nor a plea. Cannon's mocking laughter ceased, replaced by a quiet nod of resignation. "Fine," he agreed simply, and just like that, our marriage was over. The divorce unfolded in a haze, defined by signatures and quiet meals, each of us ensconced in our solemn thoughts. When everything was finalized, Cannon departed, taking the last vestiges of our shared existence and leaving behind a deep void filled with betrayal and sorrow. Upon disclosing the divorce to my parents, their reaction was tinged more with relief than sorrow. "We never understood what you saw in him," my father confessed, barely concealing his relief after my marriage. It was over, but deep down I knew they were right. The distance between Cannon and me had grown too vast, a reality that became excruciatingly clear by the end. Cannon, ever relentless, kept returning with new aliases, spouting the same tired lines. It was then I knew it was time for a replay of the past. I reached out to Raiden, our head of security. "Raiden, it's showtime again. Can you keep an eye on Cannon? I suspect he's all talk and no substance." Raiden agreed immediately, no questions asked. The report he later handed me was both amusing and enlightening. Cannon, living the high life? More like a facade of grandeur. His supposedly extravagant lifestyle was nothing but smoke and mirrors. The luxury cars were rented, and the lavish vacations were charged to his new wife's dime. Going through the report, I couldn't help but chuckle. Cannon was the same as ever, chasing after the shiny and superficial, mistaking it for treasure. Flipping through the pages, each one confirmed that leaving him was the right decision. The canon I thought I knew was nothing more than an illusion, and I was done wandering in that mirage. I sat back, tossing the report about Cannon's glamorous life aside, and smiled, not because of his downfall, but because I was in command of my narrative, clear on my direction. Weeks later, at a networking event essential to my role as a CEO, I spotted Cannon. There he was, arm in arm with his new wife, playing the part of a man who had moved on to supposedly better things. He never missed a chance to boast. As they passed, he nudged his wife and pointed at me, loud enough for me to overhear. "That's my ex-wife over there." She never really made much of herself. His wife giggled, a sound that echoed sharply across the room. It stung, but only momentarily. I was about to leave the conversation behind when an older gentleman approached, his face flushed with indignation. "Young man, how dare you speak of and in that manner?" he bellowed, drawing attention from nearby attendees. "Do you realize who she is? She's the CEO of her father's company, highly successful, and a potential investor for us." Cannon's confident demeanor drained away, and his smirk was replaced by a stunned expression. He struggled to speak, but no coherent words came out. His wife, previously amused, now appeared mortified, absorbing her father's scolding. Seizing the moment, I decided to deepen Cannon's embarrassment. "You know, he wasn't just seeing you when we had our problems," I told her calmly. "There were others, and it seems his old habits persist." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo Raiden had taken, depicting Cannon close with another woman, clearly not his wife. Her reaction was immediate. Her expression crumbled into a mix of hurt and fury. "You're lying," she shrieked at me, but a glance at Cannon's face confirmed her fears. What followed was chaotic, a frenzy of shouting and accusations, as Cannon scrambled to placate his irate wife. The unfolding scene was a spectacle of his making, and as I walked away, I felt the weight of that chapter fully close behind me. At the gathering, I caught myself smiling as I discreetly observed the attendees attempting not to gawk too openly. Turning on my heel, I walked away, reflecting on how Cannon's life was coming apart. While I found no pleasure in his distress, there was an undeniable sense of poetic justice in witnessing karma unfold. Since our last encounter, I had evolved, becoming more resilient and successful than Cannon could have ever envisioned. Following the debacle at the event, Cannon's reputation plummeted. His wife, having had enough of his infidelities, ended their marriage. The extravagant life he once boasted about quickly crumbled as his father-in-law repossessed the luxurious car and upscale apartment Cannon was so proud of. His high society friends disappeared faster than a wisp of smoke, leaving him isolated and struggling. The last I heard, he was back to waiting tables, buried under a mountain of debt accumulated from maintaining a facade of prosperity. Reflecting on the past, I recalled how Cannon had ridiculed my modest lifestyle and aspirations. Now, he was the one hustling to make ends meet, a stark contrast to his earlier arrogance. While I harbored no ill wishes towards him, part of me felt this was an inevitable reckoning. Amidst this turmoil, something remarkable happened. I met someone new. Let's call him Jack. Jack is the antithesis of Cannon, grounded, unpretentious, and values sincerity, hard work, and genuine laughter over a simple cup of coffee. Jack and I connected instantly, with no pretenses, just two people relishing each other's presence and appreciating the simpler pleasures of life. It's refreshing to be with someone who understands the importance of authenticity, not needing the dazzle of glamour to feel significant. This turn of events has shown me that life tends to come full circle. I've weathered numerous challenges, overcome betrayals, and emerged stronger. Meeting Jack and witnessing Cannon's downfall has been part of this incredible journey. It feels as though I've turned the page on a painful chapter and embarked on a new one brimming with hope and genuine contentment.
"Why aren't you eating dinner?" my father-in-law Adrian asked, noticing that there was only enough food at the table for 3. We were seeing him for the first time in a long time, gathering for New Year's. "It happens all the time," I muttered under my breath. "What?" Adrian looked curiously across the table at my mother-in-law, Sally, and my husband, Emmett. What exactly do you mean by "it happens all the time"? He added. A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren would have to be a slave, wouldn't she? Sally responded casually, chewing on the hamburger steak I had made, as if her words were second nature. That's right. Teresa is our slave, Emmett added with a grin, sipping his beer loudly. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat. His tone mirrored Sally's, casual and biting. As expected, Emmett took me to his mother's every weekend to help with housework. Even though you can't give her grandchildren, I'm letting you stay here. You should appreciate her and do the best you can for my mom, he would say, as if I owed them my existence. I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I had made a commitment. Even if I refused, Emmett would verbally push me into it. He knew how I struggled with a short temper and difficulty finding my words. Mom, I brought a slave. He even greeted me that way recently when we arrived. What are you talking about? Adrian seemed offended, his brows furrowing as he addressed Sally and Emmett. That's no way to speak to Teresa, he remarked. That's a normal family with children, mother-in-law retorted, mocking. Teresa's infertility took the possibility of grandchildren away from you, she continued. Teresa, it's not your fault, Adrian said, turning to me. His voice softened as he continued. You shouldn't be treated like this, Sally scoffed, waving him off. What do you mean, Adrian? You live so far away, so stay out of this. You don't understand our family dynamics, my mother-in-law added. That's right, Dad, Emmett continued, clearly dismissing his father's concern. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the possibility of having grandchildren. Their mocking tones stung, and I busied myself with tossing the coffee beans into the grinder, pretending not to hear. My mother-in-law and Emmett always ordered coffee the moment they finished eating. I hadn't even had the chance to eat dinner. The only thing I'd managed was a piece of sweet bread earlier while I was shopping for Sally. As I was grinding the beans, a single coffee bean escaped and fell to the floor. I stared at it for a moment, feeling an odd kinship with the way it had fallen out of place. My name is Teresa, and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During weekday lunch hours, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same local bank as Emmett, but I left 3 years ago. I quit to focus on fertility treatment. We were unable to have children, and after a year of trying, we were told the issue was on my side. Shortly after that, Emmett and Sally began to change. Originally, we both worked and managed our own income and budgets, but when I quit my job, Emmett took over the finances, our savings, rent, insurance, and started giving me money for living expenses. First, we lived comfortably on $1,000 a month. However, when we stopped fertility treatments, Emmett was quick to say, "Since we don't have treatments anymore, you can save money." Those were the first words he said when we made the decision to stop trying to conceive. What? I remember asking, shocked. Because of the financial burden of the treatments, I've been giving you more money, but you don't need it anymore. You can go back to work if you want, Emmett said coldly. True to his word, he cut back the allowance, first to $800, then $600, then even $500 a month. Desperately, I tried to find work again, but my mother-in-law, of all people, got in the way. Working full-time isn't good for a wife, Sally would say dismissively. She will tell you that if you don't share the housework, she will divorce you, she added. So you're saying I shouldn't work? I once asked, hoping for clarity. Of course not. Part-time work is fine, but your priority is Emmett and me. You can't give me grandchildren, so it's the least you can do, Sally uttered, her voice sharp. Is it really so terrible that I can't have children? Despite going through painful treatments, I wasn't able to give them a child. My mother-in-law, however, seemed to revel in my misfortune. My bathroom's filthy. Come clean it, she'd demand. Drive me. I'm going out to dinner with a friend. Her requests were endless, and each weekend, I found myself at my in-laws, running errands and cleaning. No matter how hard I tried, nothing was good enough. Why are you folding the laundry like that? Fold it properly, Sally once shouted, throwing the laundry I had folded neatly onto the floor. She seemed to take pleasure in belittling me. After dinner that night, Adrian stood up and glanced my way. Teresa, he began, his voice tentative. I'm going out for a drink. Would you like to join me? You don't have to if you don't want to. I hesitated, but the sincerity in his eyes made my decision for me. Okay, I whispered, unable to hide the exhaustion in my voice. He must have sensed it too. I was thinking about what happened during dinner, Adrian said gently as we left the house. You've been treated so badly by Sally and Emmett. His words tugged at the knot in my chest, and without meaning to, I started to cry. Adrian reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. It's okay. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen. We ended up at a small, cozy bar in town. It was quiet, with just a few people scattered at tables. Adrian ordered a beer, and I went with a whiskey soda. We also ordered mixed nuts and a salad to share. After a sip of his drink, Adrian leaned forward. Sally and Emmett's behavior during dinner was unacceptable, he began quietly, and I can't stand it anymore. I'm blamed for not being able to have children, I told him, and I'm forced to run errands. My father-in-law listened intently as I shared my troubles. My husband won't let me work full-time. He's reduced my living expenses. Now he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave, I continued, feeling the weight of the words. My father-in-law sighed. Sally is not happy unless she gets her way. Yeah, I know, I said, nodding. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Emmett. She would yell at me so much that I began to dislike her. And now we pretend to be a happy couple, Adrian continued. After his words, I genuinely envied my father-in-law for having a place to escape to. You're not tough enough to make yourself heard, he added after a moment. Yeah, I agreed, a bit defeated. But venting to you makes me feel better. Good, he said with a smile. That makes me happy. Before leaving the restaurant, we had one more beer and whiskey soda. But just as we returned home, the situation unfolded. I'm back, I said, opening the door. My mother-in-law and husband were both standing there, glaring. Dad, did you have a night out with my wife? Emmett asked sharply, his eyes narrowing at the two of us. What? I just invited Teresa for a drink, my father-in-law explained calmly. My mother-in-law, Sally, was furious. What kind of relationship is this where you can go out for drinks together? I tried to speak up, but she cut me off. What are you thinking, Teresa? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man? You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires? She rebuked. Emmett and Sally both pointed accusingly at me. Enough! A powerful voice echoed through the room like thunder. My father-in-law was livid, his eyes blazing as he stared them down. What is it with you two and your obsession with desire? All I wanted was for Teresa to relax. The intensity of his anger made my heart race. Mild-mannered people, when enraged, are often the hardest to face. Sally, Adrian bellowed. My mother-in-law shuddered, clearly shaken. Whether she was scared of him or hiding something, I couldn't tell. You said, what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law that you go out drinking together? That's my daughter-in-law you're treating like a slave, and I took her out to get her mind off things. That's all? My father-in-law tried to explain. Sally's lip curled. Because of Teresa, I can't have grandchildren. My father-in-law turned toward her, eyes burning. How can you say that when you hate children? Those words stung. What? I cried, barely able to contain myself. For years, Sally had blamed me for not giving her grandchildren. Well, grandchildren are different than other children, aren't they? Sally mumbled, now on the defensive. That said, I don't think you wanted them enough to treat Teresa like this. You're just making excuses to point the finger at her, my father-in-law said coldly. Sally opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She averted her gaze, too afraid to meet his eyes. Emmett, my father-in-law said, turning to his son. Wait, what? Emmett stammered, taken aback. I heard you only give Teresa $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? Adrian asked. Emmett shifted uncomfortably. No, I pay rent and insurance, he muttered. Even so, my father-in-law said, his voice growing sharper. I don't think that's all of your salary. Emmett turned his head away, biting his lip. He had no quick excuse this time. I came here to discuss our future, my father-in-law said, his voice steady now. Let's get right to it. He led us into the living room. What do you mean, discuss our future? Sally asked, her voice overlapping with Emmett's as they both followed. My father-in-law stood his ground. We've been pretending to be a couple for years, Sally, so we no longer need to live together. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here, he concluded. That's fine, Sally exclaimed excitedly. But then her tone changed. But, Adrian paused, I changed my mind after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier. I'm selling the house, Sally. I'll leave you, he added. No, Sally gasped, standing up in shock. Where am I going to live? Why don't you just get a place of your own? My father-in-law said with a raised eyebrow. How am I going to do that? Sally cried. I can't pay rent. Get Emmett to help you, he continued. He only gives her $500 a month. I'm sure he can pay for you. That's not possible, Emmett said, throwing up his hands, looking increasingly nervous. My father-in-law's eyes narrowed. What do you mean it's not possible? If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt, Emmett blurted out. Sally gasped. My husband swallowed hard, but I caught it. Debt? Sally had debt? You just mentioned debt, didn't you? My father-in-law asked, his voice low and dangerous. Emmett fidgeted, glancing at his mother. It's Mom's debt. I'm her co-signer, he confessed. My father-in-law's face tightened. Explain, he demanded. Sally burst into tears, but his fury didn't wane. Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer, Emmett said finally, his voice resigned. At the time we stopped fertility treatments, Mom made an investment. She made some money at first, but then the stock market crashed, my husband explained. My father-in-law's expression darkened further. You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt? Emmett nodded. I used family funds, he explained. At the time we were told the stocks would go up, but instead we went into debt. Now I'm paying it with my salary, and Mom's repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket. I had never heard anything about stocks or debt. All this time, Elizabeth had blamed me for not having children, but now I realized she had lost everything on a gamble, and we were all paying the price. I couldn't help but say the first thing that popped into my mind. That's also when you and Emmett began treating me like a slave, I blurted out, looking at my mother-in-law. Teresa, what are you trying to say? She asked, her voice laced with confusion. Were you just taking it out on me? The slave treatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments. I doubt it's because you wanted a grandchild so badly. The simple answer is that you were taking it out on me, because that was satisfying, I said angrily. My mother-in-law stayed silent, as expected. Emmett, my husband, shifted uncomfortably. He had been using the money he took out of my monthly expenses to pay off his debts. He could save money, because there was no longer fertility treatment. He didn't give me less money for some unknown reason. He just needed the money to repay his mom's debt. You stupid idiot, my father-in-law finally exploded, unable to hold back any longer. Even if it's family money, it's money I worked for and saved. You put it in stocks without consulting me, and to top it all off, you lost it. What kind of money are you spending? He demanded, his voice shaking with anger. After saying this, my father-in-law suddenly left the room, as if something had clicked in his mind. He looked like he was headed to the second floor. We all followed him. What are you doing? Emmett asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Show me Sally's stuff. I'll check what she's been buying, my father-in-law commanded, his tone unwavering. Stop! My mother-in-law cried and screamed, but her husband didn't care. Stop it! She shouted again, desperate now. Her husband opened the closet door as she yelled. The first thing that caught my eye was a luxury handbag. With just a quick glance, you could see at least 10 of them. Teresa, are these bags expensive? My father-in-law asked, turning to me. They're all luxury items costing over $1,000 each, I replied, still processing the extent of the extravagance. My father-in-law opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet. There was an array of accessories, rings, necklaces, earrings. Some of them had diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones on them. I picked up a ring and looked inside, finding an engraving of K18, indicating it was made of 18-karat gold. Sally, you bought all these expensive things without telling me? My father-in-law asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. I'm sorry, she muttered weakly, avoiding his eyes. Divorce, he snapped, turning his eyes on Sally with disgust. All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Teresa like a slave. Divorce. I want a divorce and I won't take no for an answer, he continued. Then how am I supposed to live? Sally protested, her voice rising in panic. Talk to Emmett, her husband shot back. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move. My mother-in-law couldn't say anything back. Emmett just stood there, nodding his head and biting his lip. He no longer had the arrogant and domineering demeanor he used when he treated me like a slave. The next day, my father-in-law got 2 sets of divorce papers. Here, Teresa, he said, handing one to me. If you want to file for divorce too. I looked at Emmett. He sighed and looked away from me, his shoulders slumped. Of course I want a divorce, but more importantly, I want alimony from these people, I replied. I thought hard about this all night last night. How have I been suffering for so long? What do I want to do now? I really wanted to have a child. The fertility treatment was agonizing, but I endured it. Then I realized I couldn't conceive, I continued, holding back the in my eyes. All the painful tests and treatments I went through to become a mother were for nothing. I can't have a baby, no matter how hard I try. As I was grieving, Emmett told me that since I didn't need fertility treatment anymore, he would reduce my living expenses. I finished. What? Are you saying that this is all Emmett's fault? My mother-in-law exclaimed. Shut up, Sally, Adrian shouted at his wife. My father-in-law was horrified by the truth, and my mother-in-law immediately stopped talking. She had blamed me for not giving her a grandchild and treated me like a slave. Do you know how hard it was for me? I questioned angrily. Naturally, neither Sally nor Emmett would respond, but in the end, Emmett just needed money to pay off his debts. For Sally, it was just an outlet for the stress of losing money in the stock market. I want you to reimburse me for this, I said firmly. What if I say I won't pay? Emmett snapped. Then I'll talk to my lawyer, I replied coolly. Emmett put his palm to his forehead and fell silent. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. When he put his house on the market, he found a buyer within a few days. Someone was just looking for land to build a house in that area. So they decided to tear down the old house and clear the land before selling it. Having no place to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment that looked like it would cave in from a gentle breeze. She now lives with my ex-husband. In addition to their living costs, they have to pay off their debt and alimony to me, which I'm sure is very difficult for them financially. My mother-in-law is working at a supermarket during the day and a part-time job at a pub at night. Emmett also works a second job on the weekends at a wedding hall, in addition to his company job. They complain to everyone around them that it's hard to pay their debt and alimony while watching others become happy. Meanwhile, I moved into a beautiful little apartment and got a job through my father-in-law. It's a clerical job at a security company. He said I could use my knowledge of accounting and my skills from working at a bank. I want you to be happy, my father-in-law said kindly. If you ever need help, just tell me anything. He's on my side and I will do my best in this new chapter to reassure him. This time I will shine on my own. The morning of my first day at work, I put on a new suit and made a promise to myself. Hey there. My name is Rebecca. I'm a 24-year-old woman who recently got married to the love of my life, Jordan. Get ready for an absolutely crazy revenge story from my wedding day. This tale revolves around my mother-in-law, Cherry, who tried to turn my special day into a chaotic nightmare. Let's begin with how Jordan and I met. We met at a college event where Jordan was performing a song with his band. I heard him sing and was immediately drawn to him. I managed to talk to him after, and from our first conversation, we knew we wanted to go out. We started hanging out more and getting to know each other. Before we knew it, 3 years had passed, and we decided to get married. Now, one thing you should know is that while Jordan and I have enjoyed a blissful relationship, Jordan's mother, Cherry, absolutely hated me. From the moment I entered her son's life, Cherry treated me with disdain. She was overbearing and controlling, determined to assert her dominance and make my life a living hell. For instance, there was a time when I invited both Jordan's family and mine to our newly purchased apartment for a celebratory dinner. I cooked all the meals while Jordan cleaned and decorated the house. While everyone else enjoyed it and congratulated us, Cherry constantly made snide remarks. She complained about the food, my clothes, and the cleanliness of the apartment. Anything she could complain about, she did. Nobody said anything, choosing to ignore her, except for Jordan's dad, Damien, who occasionally asked her to stop. I ignored her too, but eventually, Jordan snapped at her. Honestly, this has not been a good dinner. If it were up to me, I would have done so much more for Jordan. It's his first apartment. It deserves a bigger celebration, Cherry said in her usual condescending tone. Enough, Mum, Jordan said firmly. But... Cherry began, but Jordan cut her off. No buts. You've been nothing but rude today. Rebecca worked hard on today's dinner, and I think she deserves some appreciation at the very least, he added angrily. Oh, but darling, I was just saying. She tried to continue. Please stop talking. I would like you to apologize to Rebecca for your rude behavior, Jordan demanded. Fine, whatever. Sorry, Cherry muttered grudgingly. It's okay, I guess, I said, trying to keep the peace. Jordan wasn't done, though. And if you must know, Mum, this apartment is in both our names. Rebecca didn't work on this dinner alone. I cleaned and decorated this house. So thank you for letting me know how I did my job, he said sarcastically. Cherry, flustered, backpedaled. Oh no, I'm so sorry, darling. Save it, Mum, Jordan said, and that was the end of it. That incident was an eye-opener for my mother-in-law because after that, she stopped insulting me as much as she used to. Instead, she stayed silent when I was around. Honestly, I loved it. Her silence gave me the peace of mind I needed. After Jordan proposed to me in a perfect beach proposal, Cherry's resentment only grew. While she remained silent, her aggression came out in her actions. Cherry started doing things to physically hurt me. Once, she accidentally spilled scalding hot tea on my lap. Another time, she accidentally pushed me down the stairs when I was wearing heels. I didn't retaliate because I didn't want to create more drama. Still, I tried to make amends by letting her help with certain parts of the wedding planning. One of the things I was most excited about was choosing my wedding gown, and I invited her to join me and my bridesmaids. At first, everything went relatively smoothly, but Cherry became agitated when the attention wasn't on her. She started causing a scene, loudly complaining about the lack of choices and critiquing every dress I tried on. While my bridesmaids were supportive and cheered me on, Cherry would pinch the fabric of the dresses, and me in the process, under the guise of checking if the dress needed altering. She even brought safety pins and would poke me while pretending to make adjustments. She also argued with the cashier about the prices, even though Jordan and I had more than enough money to buy the most expensive dress in the store. Cherry just wanted all the attention. Eventually, the manager came out and asked her to leave, but not before she screamed about how the store was trash and that the whole event was a waste of her time. That was the last straw for me. I had been poked, prodded, and humiliated in one day. I confided in Jordan afterward. It was a disaster today, baby, I said, exhausted. What happened, darling? Jordan asked, concerned. Your mother humiliated me. It's only a miracle she wasn't there the whole time, I complained. Not there? Where'd she go? He asked, clearly surprised. She got escorted out, so you can imagine how she behaved, I explained. Oh God, are you okay? Jordan asked, looking worried. Well, she poked me with safety pins, called all my choices hideous, and tried to haggle with the store clerk. I'm so sorry, baby. What do you want to do about it? He asked gently. I don't want her help with the wedding. I know she's your mother, but she's a hazard to me. It'll be a miracle if I attend our wedding with just a couple of scratches, I concluded. Yes, of course, honey. If you're not okay with something, I won't force it on you. I'll text Mum and let her know, Jordan assured me. You go take a bath and relax now. Thank you so much, darling, I said, feeling relieved. Jordan and I decided to minimize contact with her to prevent any more injuries for me. And yes, we did confront her about her behavior on several occasions. She only responded in one of two ways, either nonchalance or loud sobbing while victimizing herself. Both of these were too hard to deal with, so we simply cut her off until the wedding. Being completely cut off from the wedding, planning only made things worse. Cherry kept trying to start arguments with Jordan and me over text, but my father-in-law Damien handled it. He was on our side and told us not to worry about Cherry and asked us to focus on the wedding. The relief I felt thanks to Damien allowed me to put my heart and soul into planning my wedding. I had meticulously planned every aspect of my dream wedding. Everything from the venue to the color of the table napkins was well thought out. I wanted our wedding to be a reflection of Jordan and me and our relationship. I invited everyone important to us and ensured a wide variety of foods to cater to everyone's needs. After months of intense planning, I had completely forgotten about Cherry. However, at my bachelorette party, my best friend and maid of honor Laura brought her up in conversation. Laura asked, "Do you think Cherry will do something at your wedding?" Brushing it off, I replied, "Nonsense, I don't think she will." "I'm not saying she will, but think about it. You and Jordan excluded her from helping plan the wedding," Laura pointed out. "True, but I still doubt that. That would draw way too much attention to her," I said. "Come on, Rebecca. You know Cherry loves having all the attention on her, and you know she'll want all the attention on your special day more than anything," Laura pressed. "I don't know," I said, unsure. "You can't seriously be struggling to grasp this possibility. She has never stopped trying to ruin your day and efforts. What makes you think she wouldn't want to ruin one of the biggest days of your life?" Laura said with conviction. "Okay, fine. What do you propose I do?" I asked. "Since we aren't entirely sure Cherry will try something, let's just prepare for it. We'll come up with a plan and only execute it if Cherry does try to ruin your day. If she wants attention, we'll give it to her. We'll have everyone's eyes on her and watch her entire reputation unravel," Laura suggested. "Isn't that a bit too much?" I hesitated. "A bit too much? Is Cherry thinking she can ruin your day? Just follow my lead," Laura insisted. "Okay then, I'll leave this in your hands," I finally agreed. Eventually, the day finally arrived. The day was frantic, but everything felt worth it as I walked down the aisle. I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement and nervousness. Seeing Jordan at the end of the aisle, tearing up while smiling wide, made me feel overjoyed. All I could think of was how I couldn't wait to spend the rest of my life with Jordan. Everyone was either smiling big or crying, and the entire atmosphere seemed to be bursting with happiness. Everything felt right, and I felt like all my months of hard work had finally paid off. However, my happiness would soon be short-lived, because little did I know that Cherry had different plans of her own. Cherry's real colors began to show as the ceremony began. She sat in the first row, huffing and puffing, apparently angry at not being the center of attention. Even the most joyful person would tremble at her scowl, but it didn't stop there. Cherry began openly muttering her disapproval as the officiant began to speak. She made sarcastic remarks about the decorations, the seating, the choice of vows, and in general, the ceremony itself. Her passive-aggressive remarks ran throughout the hall, making our guests uncomfortable. While some of them only gave her a couple of glares, others coughed to drown out her negativity. When the time came for Jordan and me to exchange rings, Cherry scoffed audibly and rolled her eyes as if the whole affair was beneath her. Her blatant lack of support and enthusiasm for our union was on full display, ruining the sacredness of the moment. For the most part, Jordan and I ignored it. On the ride to the reception hall, Jordan and I talked about the whole ordeal. "Oh my God, what is wrong with her?" Jordan exclaimed. "I know, right? I can't believe the nerve she has," I replied, shaking his head. "I'm going to have a word with her, don't hold me back," he said, frustrated. "Oh, believe me, I won't. You might have to hold me back," I continued with a chuckle. "Okay, you know what? We still have our plan, let's go full throttle. Mom wants attention? Fine, we'll put the spotlight on her," Jordan said, his resolve hardening. "Yes. Should I give Laura the green signal?" I asked. "Absolutely. I don't think anyone can put her in her place. It's time for her to see herself through everyone else's eyes," my husband continued firmly. "Finally. I hope this will make things better for us. We deserve better than this," I said with a sigh. "Yes, my dear. If it doesn't work, we'll completely cut her off. We'll start fresh," Jordan concluded. "I can't wait," I agreed. We reached the venue hall, feeling better and more than ready to celebrate our marriage as the reception started, and guests began filling in. The music got louder, and the drinks started flowing. Jordan and I took to the dance floor for our first dance. We then called on our friends and family to join us on the dance floor and let loose. Laughter and joy rang through the hall. Jordan and I were overjoyed. However, Cherry wasn't done yet. Oh no, she had more in store for us. Unbeknownst to Jordan and me, she made it a point to complain about every little detail. From the flowers, to the table seating arrangements, to whoever was standing next to her. She would walk up to random guests and loudly voice her displeasure. Realizing that no one was paying attention to her, Cherry decided to try and sabotage me. During the cake-cutting ceremony, she attempted to accidentally push me into our cake. Thankfully, Jordan was there to save me. When that didn't work, Cherry decided to accidentally trip and spill her drink on me. However, Cherry actually tripped and spilled her drink on herself. Not being able to sabotage me only made her angrier. Her piece de resistance was holding up a blown-out candle to a smoke detector, causing an alarm, and indeed, an alarm went off. Everyone was panicking, but Jordan managed to get security to check. They gave us the green signal and told us to carry on. When tiredness began to set in, Jordan and I decided it was time to sit down and make toast. Jordan and I toasted our relationship while many of our loved ones made several speeches too. Cherry, however, decided to ignore everyone's heartfelt words and acted like she didn't receive enough attention. In a truly cringeworthy moment, she grabbed the microphone and began rambling about her achievements and how she had always been the guiding force in her son's life. The room fell silent, and a sense of embarrassment washed over the crowd as they exchanged awkward glances. Cherry remained unaffected by the atmosphere. She kept going, happy that all eyes were finally on her. Jordan and I exchanged uncomfortable looks. When we'd heard enough of Cherry's speech, I looked at Laura and nodded, signaling her to put the plan in motion. I had enlisted the help of my most trusted friends. Together, we had come up with a plan to put Cherry in her place. I knew her microaggressions towards me during the wedding planning would come to a head on the wedding day. Laura and I shared our plans with the bridesmaids and best men. The plan began with all the bridesmaids, groomsmen, and waitstaff wearing pinned-on cameras. We wanted to make sure that all of Cherry's actions and words were caught. As the reception started, we subtly goaded Cherry into talking. The bridesmaids and groomsmen engaged her in seemingly innocent conversations, acting so well that Cherry began spilling all her feelings. She talked smack about me and eventually expressed how she wished she could stop the wedding. To fuel the fire, we strategically positioned our waitstaff, who had been briefed on the plan. They ensured Cherry received subpar service, spilled drinks, and incorrect orders, making her increasingly uncomfortable and frustrated. This only encouraged her to continue bad-mouthing the wedding. She was intentionally rude to the waitstaff, never missing a chance to curse at them. One of the waitstaff overheard her plan to sabotage me by spilling her drink on me. So, they accidentally tripped her, leading to Cherry spilling her drink on herself. We captured it all on camera. As the guests' tiredness was beginning to settle in, everyone wearing a camera secretly removed their SD cards and handed them to our best man, who worked in videography. He quickly compiled all the footage and handed our maid of honor, Laura, a USB. Now, as soon as Cherry had all eyes on her, we were ready to execute our revenge plan. It was time to show Cherry that her actions had consequences. The lights dimmed as a screen lowered, and a video was projected. Lo and behold, it was Cherry talking smack about me during the wedding. The video was a compilation of her rude comments and behavior. It even caught her setting off the smoke alarm. Everyone sat shell-shocked. No one could believe the lengths Cherry went to ruin her own son's wedding. By the end of the video, almost everyone was glaring at her. The few who weren't were wearing expressions of disgust. Cherry, on the other hand, was flabbergasted. Before she could respond, my best friend and maid of honor, Laura, grabbed the mic. With a glint of mischief in her eyes, she began recounting embarrassing stories about Cherry in a comedy roast style, much to the crowd's amusement. The room erupted in laughter at Cherry's expense, leaving her humiliated. Cherry jumped up from her seat, face red with anger. She tried to yell a response, but Laura kept her engaged in front of everyone. "None of that is true! Stop it right this second!" Cherry demanded, her voice trembling with rage. Laura smirked, not missing a beat. If I asked anyone in this room about a bad experience, they'd all say, that one time with Cherry. Cherry glared at her, her fists clenched. Why is no one stopping her? She shouted angrily. Honey, Laura said, her tone sharp. If everyone tolerates you, they can tolerate me. I'm being an angel compared to you. Cherry, desperate for support, turned to Jordan. Jordan, say something. This woman is humiliating your mother. Jordan, calm and collected, responded, Humiliating you? No, she's just poking fun. Everyone seems to be enjoying this, he said, offering her a smile. The exchange left Cherry angrier than ever. Seeing that, I signaled the DJ to turn up the music, cutting her off mid-rant. Her face grew redder with every word Laura threw at her. As the music played, the crowd returned to the dance floor, leaving Cherry alone, fuming. It was a moment of triumph, a taste of her own medicine. After years of being mistreated by Cherry, I finally made her see how she'd been treating me. Unable to bear the humiliation, Cherry left. The rest of the night was a celebration of love and unity, free from her toxic presence. Our revenge had succeeded, reminding Cherry and everyone that actions have consequences, and kindness matters.